Americans will spend nearly $3 billion on probiotic supplements this year. Capsules, gummies, powders, all promising to deliver good bacteria straight to your gut. Here's what most of those labels don't tell you. A huge share of what's in that capsule never makes it past your stomach acid alive. Manufacturers know this, which is why so many of them now brag about delayed release coatings, an entire industry of engineering built just to help their product survive the trip your body was never designed to make easy in the first place. Your grandparents never had that problem. They never needed a capsule with a coating. They had food that was alive with active cultures, doing the job 1,000 different ways, instead of whatever fixed list of strains happens to be printed on a label. So today we're going back. We'll explore 15 fermented foods that do the job better than store-bought supplements. And I've split this list into 2 parts on purpose. The first 8 are things you can probably find on your next regular grocery run. Some of them might even be in your kitchen already. The last 7 are worth a trip to an Asian grocery store, a health food store, or maybe a farmer's market. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that trip is worth making. Let's start with something that's probably sitting in your pantry right now. Number 15 is Worcestershire Sauce. And if you've never thought of it as a fermented food, you're not alone. Most people haven't. Traditional Worcestershire is built on fermented anchovies, with tamarind and molasses folded in, then aged in barrels for anywhere from several months to a couple of years. The story goes that the original recipe was mixed up, forgotten in a cellar, and rediscovered over a year later, by which point it had mellowed into something worth bottling. That particular tale is likely more company legend than verified history, but what isn't in question is the process itself. Real Worcestershire is a genuinely aged fermented condiment, not just a flavoured vinegar. Check your own bottle. If anchovies or fish are listed in the ingredients, what you've got in your fridge right now has already been through months of fermentation before it's ever reached the store shelf. Now, if a bottle of steak sauce can sneak fermentation past almost everyone, here's a jar doing the exact same thing in plain sight. Number 14 is dill pickles, but only the real kind. And here's how to tell the difference in about 5 seconds at the store. Most pickles on the shelf are vinegar brined. That basically means the cucumbers were dunked in an acidic vinegar solution, which preserves them and gives you that familiar sour bite, but there's no live fermentation involved at all. True fermented pickles are salt-brined instead. Cucumbers submerged in a simple salt water solution and left to sour naturally as lactic acid bacteria take over. Look for fermented pickles in the refrigerated section. Because the live cultures need to stay cold, you won't find traditionally salt-brined dill pickles with live, active cultures in a shelf-stable aisle. Check the ingredients for just cucumbers, water, salt, and spices. No vinegar listed at all. Now, let's move on to a bottle that's been sitting in nearly every kitchen for a different reason entirely. Number 13 is apple cider vinegar, and specifically the cloudy kind. The kind that most people assume has gone bad. That cloudy strand at the bottom of the bottle is called the mother, a living colony of bacteria and yeast left over from fermentation. Filtered crystal clear vinegar has had that stripped out for appearance's sake. The unfiltered version keeps it intact. A tablespoon in warm water, or worked into a salad dressing the traditional way, is the easiest way to use it. Just give the bottle a shake first, since the mother always settles at the bottom. Number 12 is olives, and here's something most people never think about. A raw olive straight off the tree is bitter enough to be genuinely unpleasant to eat. So every olive you've ever had was cured somehow before it reached your plate. There are a few traditional methods, but brine curing is the one that actually involves fermentation. Olives submerged in salt water for weeks or months, while natural bacteria slowly mellow out that bitterness. Quick lye cured or vinegar cured olives skip that fermentation step entirely and get you to the finish line faster, but without the same living process. Look for olives cured in just salt, water and thyme. Most traditional Mediterranean-style olives at a deli counter or specialty shops fit the bill. Speaking of the deli counter, here's a cut of meat most people have no idea is fermented at all. Number 11 is dry-cured salami, and this one tends to genuinely surprise people, the same way real aged cheese did in one of our earlier fermented foods videos. Traditional salami isn't just seasoned and dried. It's fermented with specific bacterial cultures, like those used to make yogurt or kimchi. These cultures produce lactic acid as they work, giving salami its tangy edge, while also making it safe to eat without cooking. That fermentation step is doing real work, not just adding flavour. Enjoying a few thin slices, the traditional way people have eaten it for centuries, is plenty. Look for salami labelled dry cured or naturally fermented, rather than the quick smoked deli versions. Now, if a cured meat can outperform a yogurt cup, brace yourself for what's coming next, because the smell alone has scared off more people than almost anything else on this list. And yet, cultures that have used it for centuries consider it one of the most valuable fermented ingredients in the entire kitchen. Number 10 is fish sauce, and it used to require a trip to a specialty market, but these days you'll find it in the international aisle of most standard grocery stores. Fish sauce is made by packing fish, usually anchovies, in salt for months, sometimes over a year, and letting the fish's own enzymes slowly break the protein down. What comes out the other end isn't a live culture food the way yogurt is. It's something arguably more useful for how you actually cook. Free amino acids and glutamate. The exact compounds behind that deep, savoury taste chefs call umami. It's a byproduct of months of slow, patient breakdown, and it's the same basic chemistry professional kitchens spend a fortune trying to fake with reductions and pastes. And here's the part that makes it feel a lot less foreign than it sounds. Worcestershire Sauce, the bottle probably already sitting in your fridge door, is built on fermented anchovies too. If you've ever put that on a burger or stirred it into a pot of chili, you've already been eating this exact style of ingredient without realising it. So use it exactly the way you'd use Worcestershire. A small splash in your bolognese, your chili, a pan gravy, or a meatloaf mix disappears completely into the dish and just makes everything taste more like itself, richer, deeper, and more savoury, without a trace of fish. It smells strong straight out of the bottle, but rest assured it mellows completely once it hits heat. Number 9 is Skyr, and it's a perfect hinge point for this list, because it's fully mainstream now. You'll find it sitting in the regular dairy case, right next to the yogurt, and most people assume it basically is yogurt with a fancier name. It isn't, and the reason comes down to method, not marketing. Traditional Icelandic skyr uses the same basic bacterial cultures as yogurt, but adds one extra ingredient yogurt never uses: rennet, the same enzyme used in cheese making. That's actually why food scientists classify skyr as a fresh cheese rather than a true yogurt. Combined with skim milk and heavier straining, that's why skyr comes out thicker, and why a container of it can carry close to double the protein of a regular yogurt at the same calorie count. A cup on its own, or with fruit stirred in the traditional Icelandic way, works well and is genuinely delicious. Look for plain, unsweetened varieties, so you get the fermentation benefit without the added sugar most flavoured versions carry. Alright, that's your last easy one. Before we head into properly unfamiliar territory, there's one more bottle probably sitting in your own fridge right now that's been fermenting for years without you knowing it. Number 8 is hot sauce, and specifically the traditional kind. Made the way most classic aged hot sauces were originally built, before mass production shifted many brands over to a faster, vinegar-based method. The process is simple: chilies, salt, and thyme. The peppers ferment in their own salted mash for weeks, sometimes longer, developing real depth and tang before anything else gets added. It's the same lactic fermentation driving your pickles and your olives, just applied to a chili instead. Tabasco is one of the clearest examples still on grocery shelves today. It's fermented and barrel-aged for up to 3 years before it's ever bottled, which makes it one of the few genuinely traditional ferments most Americans already have in their kitchen. For everything else on the shelf, the label gives it away fast. If the ingredient list leads with vinegar, it's the quick, modern method. If it leads with chilies and salt, and vinegar shows up further down the list or not at all, you're looking at a traditional version. Small batch fermented hot sauces are also easy to find at farmers markets and specialty stores, usually labelled fermented or aged, and it's one of the more approachable ferments on this entire list to make at home. So no, this one won't send you hunting through an international aisle, but what's coming next will. Number 7 is Doenjang, a traditional Korean fermented soybean paste, And this is where the probiotic story gets genuinely interesting, because of how it's made. Most fermented foods you buy today, and most probiotic supplements, rely on lab-selected bacterial strains added on purpose. Doenjang uses none of that. Soybeans are formed into dried blocks and left open to whatever wild bacteria already exist in the air and on the beans themselves, then aged in traditional earthenware pots for 6 months, often much longer. Nobody is choosing which microbes show up. Whatever's naturally present gets to do the work. That matters, because it means a traditional batch of Doenjang isn't carrying one or a few strains. It's carrying a whole community of wild, naturally occurring bacteria that develop together over months of aging. A supplement capsule, by comparison, is built to deliver specific measured strains. Different goals entirely, but if diversity is what you're after, this uncontrolled, old-world process is what actually delivers it. A spoonful stirred into a simmering stew is the classic way to use it. Korean grocery stores carry it, usually refrigerated near other traditional pastes. Number 6 is Idli and Dosa batter, a South Indian staple built entirely on wild fermentation. And this one genuinely surprised me while doing the research for this video. Rice and lentils are soaked, ground and left out. That's the entire process. No starter, no packet, nothing is added. The lactic acid bacteria and wild yeast already living naturally on the grains do the whole job themselves, souring and leavening the batter over roughly half a day to a full day. This uses the same uncontrolled, whatever shows up style of fermentation we just saw with Doenjang. And that wild fermentation earns its keep twice over. It's not just building a live culture your body benefits from, it's also unlocking iron, zinc and calcium that were already sitting in the rice and lentils, but were largely inaccessible in their raw form. So the fermented version isn't just alive with more than a supplement ever could be, it's also feeding you more of what was already there to begin with. Steamed into the small round cakes called Idli, or spread thin and pan-fried into Dosa, this is genuinely one of the most accessible fermented staples in the world, once you know where to look for it. Most Indian grocery stores sell the pre-fermented batter refrigerated, ready to cook straight out of the container. Number 5 is Paocai, and this might be the most remarkable fermentation tradition on this entire list, because of how long it's allowed to just keep going. If you've ever kept a sourdough starter alive on your counter, fed it, and maybe passed some along to a friend, you already understand Paocai. It's a Chinese vegetable pickle built the same way, around a living salt brine that never gets thrown out. Instead, it gets reused and fed batch after batch, indefinitely. Some family brines have been kept alive and passed down for well over 100 years. It's like a family heirloom you can eat. Vegetables like cabbage, radish or green beans get a quick dip of just a few days in an established brine for something light and crisp, or a much longer soak in an older brine for something deeper and more complex. The part worth remembering here is that the older the brine gets, the better the flavour and the fermentation get with it. That is the exact opposite logic of almost everything else in your kitchen, and surely everything sitting in a modern grocery store, where fresh means made recently, and staying edible depends on a preservative doing the work time used to do for free. Number 4 is Gundruk, a fermented leafy green from the mountain regions of Nepal, and it uses a method you won't find anywhere else on this list. Think of it as the fermented version of beef jerky, but made with greens instead of meat. Leafy greens like mustard or radish tops are lightly wilted, then packed tightly into an airtight container, traditionally an earthenware pot, and pressed down to push out any air pockets. The same basic idea as packing cabbage into a crock to make sauerkraut. But then the leaves are left to ferment for several days. Once that fermentation has done its work, the greens get dried out in the sun. That 1-2 combination, ferment first, then dry, is what lets Gundruk last for months, with zero refrigeration. It's traditionally rehydrated with a little water and cooked into soups and side dishes, turning a shelf-stable dried green back into something soft and ready to eat. If your local Asian grocery carries Nepali or Himalayan ingredients, it's worth asking for Gundruk by name. Number 3 is Viili, a traditional Finnish fermented milk, and it has the kind of texture that makes you think, what happened here? Unlike a typical yogurt, Viili ferments into something stretchy and almost gelatinous, thick enough that you can lift a spoonful and watch it pull into long, ropey strands before it lets go. It's closer to a raw egg white than anything you'd expect from a dairy cup. That texture only happens because a very specific, very active bacterial culture is still alive and working in there, a different one than what makes yogurt or kefir. A supplement capsule gives you a fixed list of lab-grown strains, exactly what's printed on the label, no more and no less. Viili's culture is alive and undefined, doing visible work in the jar you're about to eat from, not a number some manufacturer decided on ahead of time. Traditionally eaten plain or with a bit of fruit and a light dusting of sugar, it's a genuinely different fermented dairy experience from anything else on this list. Nordic or specialty grocery stores, and increasingly some health food stores, are your best bet for finding it. Up next is a food that starts as two completely different things, each one fermented separately, and then fused together into a single ingredient that couldn't exist any other way. Number 2 is miso, and if the only miso you've had is in a bowl of soup at a restaurant, it's something that might surprise you. There's a good chance it never had a single live culture in it to begin with. Miso is made by cultivating koji, a mold, onto soybeans and rice, then letting the mixture ferment for months, sometimes years, developing that deep, salty umami flavour we talked about with the fish sauce earlier in this video. That fermentation builds a living culture of beneficial bacteria. The problem is what happens after. Most miso sold in the shelf-stable tubs at a regular grocery store gets pasteurized to survive months on a shelf, and that heat kills the exact culture the fermentation just spent months building. The fix is the same one you've heard before on this list. Live miso is always sold refrigerated, never on a shelf, and the label will usually say unpasteurized or live outright. Most Asian grocery stores and health food stores carry it. And here's a detail worth knowing even once you've got the real thing home. Live miso needs to be stirred into a soup at the very end, off the heat, never boiled, since a hard boil kills the culture just as thoroughly as pasteurization does. If you've made it this far, this is the entry the whole video has been building toward. Number 1 is Amazake, a traditional Japanese fermented rice drink that has traditionally been given to children, the elderly, and anyone recovering from illness. And in Japan, it's earned a nickname that roughly translates to drinkable IV. Here's why. By the time you're drinking it, the fermentation has already done your digestion for you. The starches in the rice are broken down into simple sugars, which is the entire reason Amazake tastes sweetly without a single grain of sugar ever being added. It's nourishment in a form the body barely has to work for. Amazake is warmed gently and sipped on its own, or used as a natural sweetener in traditional recipes in place of sugar. Look for it in the refrigerated section of Japanese or Asian grocery stores. 14 entries back, we started with a brine that does the work of a chemical preservative using nothing but time. Here at the end, we've got a rice drink that does the work of digestion before it ever reaches your body. That's the thread running through this entire list. Every single food on it, from the brine to this drink, was already doing part of the work for you, using nothing but salt, thyme, and a microbe your ancestors couldn't even see. If today made you curious about fermented drinks specifically, we've got a whole video covering 15 more of them, and it's linked at the very end, right after I show you the one resource that ties this entire list together. So there it is, 15 fermented foods, and every single one of them was doing something modern shortcuts skip. That's exactly what our free natural living starter kit is built around. 50 traditional swaps for the things modern life sold back to us. Remedies we had all along before anyone repackaged and put a higher price tag on them. The link is in the description and it's free. Take care of yourself and we'll see you in the next one here at the Natural Living Library.